Hi, friends. Christy and I just got back from the monastery. It was a beautiful trip, as always. There are a couple of things on my mind that I've been considering and want to share with you in light of the work we're doing here together. Those are, namely, sin and confession, and how they relate to the five basics. And as always, I want to at least neutralize, if not move you into a positive understanding and a real transformative, beneficial interpretation that you can work with of these words and concepts that many of us have actually been wounded by. If you remember, in one of my previous videos, I talked about sin and its etymological root in the Greek word hamartia, which was directly referring to someone in the game of archery that misses the bullseye. Now, even in my Magic Mythic fundamentalist Christian days, I was studying the Bible academically, and I knew that sin came from hamartia, which meant missing the bullseye. But it was still interpreted and taught to me by my teachers and mentors as behaving wrongly. Oh, I missed the mark. I didn't do that right. I have to apologize, ask for forgiveness, and believe in Jesus enough that he's going to make sure I get to heaven and find favor with God. That all fits very cohesively in the mythic worldview, but my trajectory was set for far beyond that, and that never even set right for me. And when I tried, even then, to right my wrongs behavioristically only, it usually produced the opposite effect. Even more tension, even more acting out. The problem is that understanding of sin starts with, and that Magic Mythic fundamentalist Christian worldview does not have an understanding of or a practice to experience yourself as the ultimate. You are automatically considered to be this body-mind fixed persona. It's actually seen as very fixed when, in actual fact, it's the most variable thing, this dense third dimensional earth plane, of all relative things that we know. Always changing, not ultimate in the least. And yet that worldview operates as though we are ultimately that, and even that this body, mind, persona, and your identity as fill in the blank with your name, even if it's slightly changed, is the one that's gonna spend eternity in heaven or hell. How could that possibly be? So, of course, if you believe that you are this thing that moves around and says words only, and that you're trying to live up to some ideal, a legalistic ideal that nobody can attain anyway. And that also was part of the scheme in the mythic Christian worldview of keeping you sinful, is that you have to first admit that you're a sinner and then admit that you always will be, that you will never do it good enough, that you will never attain righteousness on your own. If they had only seen the metaphoric symbology of the truth of actually what they're saying, that you as a finite relative self cannot achieve it on your own. But it's not through behaviorism. Sinning or missing the bullseye. Not to mention, let me rewind for a moment, that every culture and era and time and religion has a different set of tenets. Ethics are constantly changing. Ethics themselves are very relative. It seems to be a universal kind of agreement amongst the traditions that there are some basic ways to set your moral compass toward love and light and service and compassion. But even that is not behavioristically only. It's because you've found through the path a deep reservoir where those things are just natural. But at the beginning, it's important to set your sails in that direction to stay the course, because you could go through this whole dismantling process and be geared toward darkness and take the illusory nature of this place to mean it's fake, false, phony, and do whatever the fuck you want once the deconditioning has happened. So it's important to be polarized in that direction. So even if it was missing the mark ethically or behavioristically or in your actions and words, we have to ask ourselves, which dartboard or archery target are we using? Which culture, which religion? The details vary widely. So I will never say that I know exactly what they were trying to say thousands of years ago, but I'll say how it connects with where we are now and with what I'm saying to you. There is a kind of fractaled correlation, regardless of what they were meaning, even if they were coming from a magic place, a behavioristic place. According to Ken Wilber and myself, there is an evolution of consciousness upward, which means those same principles and tenets and teachings can be used, but are interpreted through your current higher stage of development. It's one of the reasons why you can take all your favorite things up the ladder with you. All of your true favorite things, not the ego stuff. But the ego stuff will come along as well until you ask it not to. And that's another story altogether. So if the bullseye is the center of the circle, and that's a metaphor they were using, that I'm relating to the center of your self, the center of your being, the center of awareness, the empty ultimate. Because if you go in and in and in and in, like the size that an arrow might make a hole in the center, there can be even a center of that hole, an even smaller object puncturing it. And you can go even smaller into the center of that hole, into the center of that hole, into the center of that hole, to nothingness, emptiness, around which all of the concentric layers arise and revolve. And you are that. So if each successive outer layer or circle was one, relatively speaking at least, further away from the center, because paradoxically, none of the layers themselves could exist without the center. The board itself couldn't exist without the center. So ultimately, there's no distance. And the relative and the ultimate become one. But for the sake of the metaphor, if the outer ring was like where you really miss the mark, because in the game of archery, that's the case, then what would that be in our sense? When you have forgotten who you are as the ultimate, when you have lost your center, not when you're relatively, as a body-mind persona, centered and peaceful and clear in my mind. No, that stuff comes as a result from remembering who you are as the ultimate. The center as the empty ultimate, who you are there, is not dependent on any of the rings. The rings are dependent on that. Get it? And so sinning is acting or thinking or behaving or believing, and everything that comes with that, as though you are not the center. And all of the flavors of ultimate that we talk about. So one that I want to point to right now, as it relates to sin and confession and projection, is that I am the only one aware of anything feel into that one real quick. And since you already know that you are not the body, not the mind, not the personality, not the ego, then when you say, I am the only one aware of anything, then you know you're not talking about just what's happening in this visual field of perception. It's a greater, deeper I. That's why the koans interlace and work together. I am the only one aware of anything. Everything arising is arising in my awareness. Check into that one real quick. Everything arising is arising in my awareness. And I cannot draw a line where my awareness ends and anything in it begins. I cannot draw a line or separate or boundary where I, as the center of the circle, as ultimate awareness, ends and anything begins. Anything including this body, not just things out there in, again, the third dimensional visual physical world. Anything. Can you? Where does your awareness end and my voice begin? Where does your awareness end and the computer screen or the TV screen or Kemper's body mind persona self doing this thing with its hand begin? Where, in fact, does Kemper arise in your awareness? Not over there, but here. In your mind, as a thought, as an idea, as a projection that's being reflected back to you. Even our new kind of cutting edge optical sciences, the study of how we see physically, is saying the same thing. There's like a projector screen that some kind of inner light of awareness like sends out and through, hits a so-called object on the exterior world and reflects back and shows up on this screen. In the yoga and Hindu world, I know it's in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, maybe it's in the Vedas as well. The Sanskrit word is chitta, by which it means the inner screen of consciousness, the mind field in our terms. So when I say in our meditation guidance, gaze on the mind field, the empty blank mind field, not the projections on it, that's what I'm talking about. Chitta. And so now we come to this word called projection, which gets thrown around a lot in psycho, spiritual, kind of new age circles. Don't project your shit onto me. Oh, I'm just totally projecting. First of all, usually those two comments themselves are coming from a relative finite self and not the ultimate. Coming from a belief in separation. And it's useful enough in that manner when you can realize Oh, it's not you, it's me. I'm sorry. I just did that because I thought what you did or said made me feel a certain way, and I can take responsibility for that. When I say taking responsibility, that's one step of it. But the next step, the humdinger step, is to realize there is no other in the first place. My favorite artistic rendition of this concept is the movie Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's brilliant. I would even recommend, it's on my Kalyana container list of things to watch way down at the bottom under movies. Highly recommend that you watch it. If it's a rainy day as it is today when I'm making this video here, then watch this video and then turn on Inception and watch it in light of what I'm saying. In the movie Inception, they induce themselves into a dream state. And go on little missions and adventures. It's similar to The Matrix, but for what I'm saying about projection, Inception is much more on point than The Matrix. Because everything arising and happening in the dreamer's dream is a part of their subconscious and is there uniquely and customizedly placed to respond to them in a particular way based on what they already believe about that thing. So whatever your beliefs are, whatever your woundedness is, whatever unresolution you have, will manifest itself in the so-called exterior world as other people and other events and politics and religion and bad things happening. Until you take responsibility, not only to recognize, and I would invite you to recognize, even do a thought experiment with me right now. And definitely later on and on a regular basis as it happens during your days. Anything that annoys you, infuriates you, frustrates you, aggravates you, makes you angry, enrages you, makes you anxious, worried, see if that quality does not have a direct string tied back to something in yourself. Now, the ego will jump in and say things like, yeah, but everybody should be outraged at what's happening in the world. Yeah, but everybody should hate Donald Trump. Yeah, but do you see what he just said? Objectively, those things may be true. But subjectively, they do not affect everyone the same way. Why? And if you get deep enough into the ultimates, your ultimate I amness, alone as that, knowing and seeing that there is no other. Now, I'm not saying that it's fake. Don't get me wrong. Because then, as I've said before, the ego can confiscate it and make you act carelessly. Like, oh, well, it's not even real anyway. I don't care. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the so-called other, the so-called exterior world is not only projected on the interior screen of your consciousness, but is also tainted by your preconceived thoughts that you have about it. This relates with family, partners, loved ones, pets, everything. So therefore, you can take it an even step further and recognize if all of this is a manifestation of my fabric of consciousness, which is the fabric of consciousness, then nothing can harm me. Nothing ultimately has the power to annoy me, anger me, frustrate me, worry me. Tune into that real quick. But even if we take it relatively, as your body, mind, self going through maturity and growing in this process with me, you're really taking responsibility for your projections. This is what it means. Anything that your partner does, anything that the news says, anything that somebody does in traffic, anything that the weather does, the weather makes people angry and frustrated. Any of that pings you in an uncomfortable way, see if you can't draw a line, tie a string back to something that you do yourself. 99% or 100% of the time, it's true. And I've known this for some time. This is part of the work that Christy and I do together as a couple. But also in making this video, I'm inspired to let you know that I'm taking more of a committed stand to really taking this one seriously for myself. It's very easy to do this spiritual work with only the things that you're comfortable with, and not, quote unquote, apply it to what you'd rather not look at. That's just called denial or even fear. So if it's true that I am the only one aware of anything, everything is arising in my awareness only, I am not the body-mind persona, and there is no separation, aka it's only oneness, then nothing can hurt me. Nothing can make me upset. There is no other bumping up against me. And for some reason, here comes how it relates to confession. For some reason, as these finite selves, whether it's conditioning or more basic than that, I don't know, we are so deeply embarrassed or ashamed to admit that not only it's not you, in fact, it's me tainting what I believe or how I see in you, but also that I'm the one that believed there was such thing as anything other than myself in the first place. Please don't hear this from your own egoic place. Because everything I'm saying, I'm not saying it as Kemper. So I don't want you to hear it as your personality self. It'll filter through and it'll give that one some tips and tricks to utilize. But everything I'm saying as ultimate awareness, you are too. So for some reason, when someone says something, does something, and the body and the mind, and even chemically, it gets strong, it reacts. And it makes it almost unbearably, convincingly obvious that that person needs to stop doing that thing. And I'm speaking from experience, from my triggers in OCD. There's this program that's working its way out of my brain, but that still reacts and convinces me that something's wrong. That somebody else is doing something to make me nervous. Not only, number one, is that my identity believing itself to be Kemper, body, mind, persona, sinning, forgetting the center. As Kemper expands and as the center filters through, I think maybe filters, it permeates, not filters, permeates through the rest of the layers, then there's no separation. And you as the body, mind, self are an expanded state of awareness. You are the center, but not egoically. I see that very clearly. And yet I still have some taking responsibility to do for projection. Remembering, reminding why I even did or said the thing in the first place, why I even sinned. And if we don't even take it legalistically, like what it says in the Bible or what the 10 Commandments are, sin very basically, intuitively, makes you feel awful because it's a lie in the first place. You have forgotten your true nature. You have forgotten yourself as the center. You have forgotten the ultimates, which led to a series of beliefs and then thoughts and then actions and words that seemed to do harm to an other, and then therefore they project back their feelings onto you, and you might feel guilty about it. This whole project and reflect chain reaction thing, boomerang. It's wild. And that's why the more you miss the mark, the more you miss the mark. Because it continues this descending, spiraling cycle that you can get out of, but you can't get out of until you can. Until something stops it, winds its way back up. And that something could be all sorts of numbers of things. Also, from one perspective, this whole manifest world, all the emotions, all the things, all the objects, all the people, all the perspectives, is the emptiness spilling itself out into fullness, or we could say nothingness overflowing into somethingness, whole unto itself, whole in each fragmented part, but wanting to experience the multiplicity, the infinite and endless variety in all dimensions, all spaces, all times of duality. I wonder if there will ever be such thing as triality. Duality, non-duality, triality, non-triality. Maybe, why not? Quadrality, non-quadrality. Interesting thought. I've never considered that before. And a lot of things change when you take responsibility. And you see, one, not only can that other person not hurt me, number two, there is no other person. It's a fabric of ultimate awareness. Number three, it's directly connected. That's another, it's a relative oneness. We are connected because what you do, I do. See if it's not true. My theory as to why it happens like that is because what I call the holographic hall of mirrors and the benevolent Heavenly Father hologram wants you to see yourself or wants to see itself in yourself. Therefore, because we're so in denial as body minds and ashamed and ignorant, and we're even lying to ourselves because often we think it's that other person. It is not me. I'm not angry. He's doing that thing. Man, methinks thou dost protest too much. Just because it's appearing in your awareness doesn't mean that it's tied to you. It's still ultimately a part of your awareness for you to experience. But if it pings you in an uncomfortable way, that's an indication that there's a direct tie. And if you say there's not, I would almost say you've not looked hard enough. And that's not the same as what the preachers were telling me back in the day. If you say you're not a sinner, you're just not admitting it. Because they were coming from the other place. I'm talking about directly intuiting, and being very honest with yourself. There's no reason to lie anymore if you are the only self. Also, who do you have to hide from? What do you have to be ashamed of? Probably from some childhood belief in punishment or hell or God's anger that you don't even believe in anymore, but the root of it is still there. And that root itself gets projected out. When you think, oh, everybody's blaming me for everything, perhaps you blame yourself, but don't want to because it doesn't feel natural, because it's not true anyway, and you've never done anything wrong. So sin, the result of missing the mark, doesn't feel good. Now, I am not a teacher that promotes once you do all this work, then you'll never be sad again, and you'll never get sick again, and you'll never blah, blah, blah. Truth is, when it's like you'll never blank again, that's a future concept itself. That too is a sin. Does that even feel good? Why is that a sin? Because it's a lie. There is no future. So often when you're afraid of something happening in the future, guess what happens? That thing. But where does it happen? In the present. It never happens in the future anyway. It's wild in this place. And it starts to get more and more fascinating and less burdensome when you realize your capability to deconstruct it. I don't like all of these ways that the New Agers say, like, wake up inside of the dream, or have power, bring back the power to yourself, or something like that, because that's some kind of negative belief in deficiency or lack or need. It's realizing what you already are. Realizing if this is a dream, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But once you start to see how it works, even when they say once you start to see how it works, then you can make it work for you and manifest your best life. Who is that needs something to work a certain way? They get it wrong. Nothing can hurt you, nothing can harm you. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to worry about. Nothing is outside of you, therefore nothing to fight. Now the work happens while you're getting to that place of remembering. So being honest, confessing or coming clean, taking responsibility. Yeah, that is my belief. Yeah. The anger that I perceive out there, or the wickedness or evil that I see out there, not only is out there, not out there, but in here. But guess what? Yeah, I do that on a daily basis. And that like double projected hall of mirrors thing happens when you're like, yeah, well, the reason I'm mad is because you made me mad. Stop. Screeching halt on the brakes. You gotta let it go. And when you confess, even if you confess to another person, so even the ego can confiscate this ultimate understanding and say like, well, there's no other person that I need to say I'm sorry to. But that other is a part of yourself. You cannot deny or fragment off, because that starts another cycle of sin. Any part or piece, it's all here, but you as a body mind are relating to it incorrectly. So it does, in fact, help to apologize, take responsibility, confess, with no ifs, ands, or buts, or becauses. Like, yeah, but I did it because you did whatever. If you're in a partnership, and I'm speaking from experience, it's good to converse, but it's most necessary and important that you take responsibility, period, on your own, and see how that other starts to respond differently. And see how your response to that other person starts to change. Telling you it works. And on the one hand, I don't know why it requires courage and bravery, but it does. So since it does, then get your bravery up, get your courage up, but not from a sense of separation. Back in the Old Testament, I guess the book of Exodus, when the burning bush appeared to Moses and told him, "You're my messenger to go set the Israelites free from slavery in Egypt." And he's like, "No, no, 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 I can't do it because I stutter." And the burning bush said, "Tell them I am that I am has sent you." That, of course, is interpreted way magic fairy tale land. But what if the realization was, Moses, don't speak from your Moses mask. Speak from your I am that I am mask, and all will be well. If you speak from this place, one of the outer rings on the bullseye circle, then there's an inherent belief in separation from the center, separation from others, isolation, not ultimate aloneness, but isolated aloneness, duality, and that you could possibly be harmed. Now, one of my primary symptoms and manifestations of OCD along the way is what's called scrupulosity. Again, I never use OCD as a crutch or as an excuse, but it is a documented facet, diagnosable clinically, of OCD. And that is an overactive guilt mechanism and the need to over apologize. So in my work, as I reminded you guys in another video, there's a concept in Sanskrit, and I believe it's Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, called Pratipaksha Bhavana, or cultivating the opposite. My work has been to apologize only when I really need to, and that has required me to ask myself, when do I really need to? Because in scrupulosity, OCD, and scrupulosity, actually, I just learned kind of recently, it has its roots and was first kind of documented in the 1600s medieval monasteries, where monks were actually joining the monastery out of guilt and were exhibiting obsessive confessive disorder. That's another OCD. And always feeling like they were sinning, always feeling like they were doing something wrong, always feeling like if somebody else was injured, then it was their fault or something like this. And that is what I did. And I would apologize for the stupidest things, and the person would always look at me like, what? Like, yeah, okay, what? Yeah, all right. Well, now on to what we're talking about. Why did you apologize for that? St. Paul, I believe, in the New Testament said, I realize that the sin of the world resides in me, or the root of all sin is with me. Now, that's a profound realization. That every place that I see someone else missing the mark, it's my own projected reflection of my missing the mark. Because this is a holographic hall of mirrors, and everything is arising in your awareness and for you, for what? We still don't know. But for you, that's obvious. Then that's the truth. So it's like, if all of this is true, then all of this is true. What are the implications of what I'm saying here? No, yeah, buts. So if you're in denial, if you perceive a sinful world and it greatly bothers you, and you think that the cause of your unhappiness is that, we're living in dark times, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't mean it has to drive you mad and drive you to want to fight the darkness with your own darkness. Because again, if you're really honest, the darkness is in you. And that also doesn't mean, the way these New Agers do it, that if you just resolve it, then all of a sudden everything is rainbows and butterflies, circumstantially. But you now have a different lens through which to see and view whatever is happening out there and thus in here. So it's coming clean. Coming clean with yourself as yourself, with an other as yourself. And it's greatly changing your own patterns that you otherwise seem to not be able to change because you think that they're caused by an other, forgetting that the other is a projection of yourself, your own subconscious. Watch Inception, really. So it doesn't even matter if that other magically says they forgive you or not, but the shift has happened in yourself. Oh, I no longer see them as other. I no longer see them as being able to hurt me. And now I see that what they were doing before was a direct result of my thoughts or beliefs or actions toward them. I now see that, holy shit, that thing they do that annoys me, I do on a daily basis. And possibly to the degree with which it annoys you is the degree with the degree to with which you do it or are in denial of it. And because I believe that this place is benevolent and that there is some positive thing here, purpose, some positive purpose. Besides freedom, liberation, and healing, but still, what's the freedom and liberation and healing for? Is that for a positive purpose? Then I believe, this is back to a train of thought that I sidetracked earlier. This is the forgiveness of sins. This is the unwinding of all of your projection. Because it's benevolent, it wants you to see it, and it wants to see itself. So since we're so ashamed and embarrassed and in denial, it makes this a hall of mirrors so that we can see it at arm's reach. We react to it at first because it's a part of ourselves that we hate, or at least slightly disgusted by. If you're honest, see if that feeling that you're projecting is not actually a feeling that you have towards yourself. Again, if you're honest. But it feels good to blindly vomit it out, release it out, and not turn the light in. So once you see that that's true, that's the benevolence, that's the wisdom working, doing what it wants to do in the first place, which is for you to see yourself and it to see itself in you. This is what I teach. I've spoken with some of you guys who have said that you've never had a teacher to really take it this far into the deep dig of practical ways and not just airy-fairy beliefs or ideas. So it might sting a little, but it's already stinging. My invitation to you is not only conceptually to realize, oh yeah, I do that thing too, but to actively come clean, whatever that looks like for you, and to actively pratipaksha bhavana, do the opposite. Until it becomes natural, until the resolution happens, until you remember who you are as the ultimate. Because this, and the only one that I haven't really mentioned yet is meditation practice, but that's a given throughout. That assists, as I told you guys in one of the Sunday gatherings, that's kind of the key. If none of them are better or more important in my mind, because they're not, they're mutually inclusive. Meditation is kind of the key, the common thread that unlocks all the others. Softens the soil of your soul, so to speak. Allows you not to be so hard, calloused, projecting, fearful, and allows you to be able to approach an other. I'm not even saying apologize. I don't even really like that word, maybe because my history with scrupulosity, because that's really surface level and behavioristic. It's coming clean. It's no longer still perceiving and perpetuating that other is another. It's relating differently with yourself. and then all the projections of your subconscious. Watch Inception. That's the third plug. That's all I'm going to give. 3 plugs for Inception. Oh, that was 4. So whatever that looks like for you, if you recognize that the ego has a pattern of doing a particular thing, because the ego itself is the ultimate antithesis to the ultimate. The ego is the ultimate sinner. It's on the farthest rungs of the archery board. It believes in all the things that you are not and makes you believe that you are separate, lacking, weak, in need, limited, or makes you believe that your limited self is unlimited. Another way of saying the same thing. Because again, the New Age teachers like to tell you, oh, you're limitless, you can do anything. But again, that's coming from a limited mindset. They're coming from the Moses mask, to use my analogy again. In Christ, all things are possible. Christ is not the man's last name. Christ is a Christ consciousness, a way and a state of being that you, as your body, mind, self, can have. That's why it was Jesus Christ. It can be your name and Christ. Christ is the same as Buddha, it's just kind of a different culture and language. That's another rabbit hole. But because I do this work on myself, every little thing gets put under the microscope. At first, it might be a little uncomfortable or require some effort, dedication, and fearlessness. Eventually, yeah, I still put everything under the microscope, but it's more natural and just kind of like weeding the garden because I know I want to do it. So at first, it might feel like you're being obsessive and like, why do I have to take every little thing? Because the ego is tricky. When you start going down a spiritual path, when you start taking accountability, taking responsibility and being accountable for yourself, for your sins, for your projection, for your confession, the ego doesn't die so easily just because you ask it to at first. Oh, sure, okay, I'm just like pretends. I'm dead. And then when you turn away, it's a zombie. The zombie ego comes back, sometimes with a vengeance and sometimes too, it's like, because now you think you're on a spiritual path and the ego's dead, so that thing that's coming back is not the ego, but it is. So you have to look at everything. Do the opposite, do the opposite, do the opposite. And it might not feel good, and that's why this is the narrow way. But I promise you, it's not just for self-mortification. There is vastness and wholeness, and I'm kind of getting tired of saying the word liberation, like you couldn't believe. I've even had a deeper layer of that, which is why I'm saying it like this just over these past few days at the monastery. I love this work. There's nothing else I want to do. And I know that I'm called to assist you along the way, but I might request or even require an approach from you that you've not received from any other teacher. But have the other teachers and approaches worked? Like all the way? I mean, yeah, some good insights and techniques and, you know, that sort of thing. But and the couple of people who have reported to me, wow, what you're asking me to do and what you're calling me to do, because I do it on myself. I'm pretty keen and good at seeing it in you. And that's also a sign of oneness, because one of you guys was liked my list of lies that the ego tells to pull you away from the ultimate. You liked that I came up with that list and it was pretty accurate. And I'm like, why do you think I came up with it so easily? Because I know them, because I've worked through them, hacked my way through that jungle of lies. So therefore, I can see clearly from my own projected mirror memory with you where the little snags are. And I'm just asking you to look. If it stings to even look, that's where you look. If it feels like I'm being authoritarian and telling you what to do, that's where you look. And then you look at why you think I'm being authoritarian. I'm not keeping you here. I'm wanting to help you. There's part in this Lord of the Rings reference, but Gandalf says, Bilbo, I am not trying to harm you. I'm trying to help you. So you have to see it that way. And I know there's all kinds of gurus that say the same thing, and there's cult leaders, and Christy and I watch these documentaries on cults, man, and so many of the teachers are saying almost verbatim some of the things I'm saying. And it's a very good reflection, speaking of which, for me. To refine what I'm saying to you. And I'm not worried to sound like I'm coming across that way. I just want you to know where I'm coming from. And those of you who have tried out my approach have recognized the benefits of it instantly. If not only to not be in denial anymore. If you don't have anything to hide, then what's wrong with looking? It's like these cop movies. Oh, well, if I can't search your car, then what you got in there? You know? Thank you all for being with me. Truly. This one is one not to just let it digest and move on. Let this digest and take a step. Take action. This requires some force, some effort. Not like fighting force, because again, there's nothing to fight. But a little bit of like, all right, Let's do it and put into plan how we're going to dismantle this thing. How can I return to the center regularly? How can I know that I've never left the center? How can I pull my body, mind, persona into the center? How can I not hit the outer rings so often? Why does that happen to begin with? How can I view the other? How can I tie the string to myself and change that pattern in myself? And then if that person continues to do that thing, it doesn't bother you anymore. That's the freedom. It's not that all of a sudden they stop. It's that you see it differently because it's cleansed of your system. The world is perfect as it is. Take that with a grain of salt. Both and paradox, etc. Everything and everybody not only is a projection of your subconscious and is the same fabric of your being as ultimate awareness, but everything and everyone is allowed to do what they want to. That's why, and today's the day after Easter, and at the monastery we were celebrating the Paschal Triduum and Holy Week, which was Jesus' last week, and crucifixion, death, and resurrection. That's why when he's on the cross and they said, if you are who you say you are, it's like, if you are that ultimate one, then make all this bad stuff stop happening. That's what they said. If you are the Son of God, and I hope I'm just helping you interpret it differently, then take yourself down from there. If you are the ultimate, as you say you are, and they're just taunting to see if you'll believe that you're not and get you into that fight, then make all this bad stuff stop happening. And you say, from the ultimate place, there is no bad stuff happening because you've been forgiven of your sins. You have cleansed the need for you to project and reflect. So his words were, no one takes my life from me. I lay it down freely. Like, you guys aren't doing this to me, because it was seen that nothing could harm him. So you have to have a keen sense. You have to have a magnifying glass. Even the things it's like, and again, this is like just at first. Eventually you get to know it. Anything that smells like the ego, anything that smells like a sin. Hopefully I've at least neutralized your interpretation and relationship with these words today. But anything that hints of that, you have to look at it. You have to do the opposite. And then when you start changing this one behavior, then all of these other behaviors start acting up like whack-a-mole to try to divert your attention from this one and to try to get you to forget about that one so it gets set free again. You don't do that one anymore, and then you're over here. You can do it. called vigilance. And it is your freedom. Be on watch. Do your practice. All the 5 basics. That's why you can't just come at projection as a body-mind self. It'll probably root in the separation even more, and the relativity. And the cycle, because you'll just continue doing it. The ultimates are the gateway. Kind of coming up with titles for each one. Again, they're not one more important than the other. But meditation is the key. The ultimates are the gateway. We'll see what I come up with for the others. Digest, assimilate, take action. That's important on this one. I love you guys. Namaste.